Welcome back, my beautiful family. If you love explosive stories about uncovering toxic lies, dramatic confrontations, and the ultimate beautiful redemption of true love, you are in the exact right place. Before we begin this emotional roller coaster, please subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and drop your comments below. Let's dive into The Unexpected Heir. The Unexpected Heir, the billionaire's path to redemption. Get ready for an incredibly powerful, deeply moving story about hidden truths, highly unexpected love, and the absolute, ultimate sacrifice for family. Have you ever had a completely random chance encounter that violently, permanently altered the entire course of your life? Part 1. A shocking revelation. The heavy, aggressive roar of the massive, custom-built BMW engine violently died down exactly in front of a highly modest, heavily run-down women's shelter on the absolute poorest outskirts of the city. Alexander Vance, flawlessly dressed in a $5,000 bespoke Italian suit, stared intensely at the crumbling brick building directly through his tinted windshield. It was absolutely not the kind of place a billionaire CEO ever frequented. But his massive corporate board of directors had aggressively insisted that he personally handle this massive charitable delivery, a substantial, highly publicized corporate donation explicitly designed to significantly boost the company's pristine public image. While two burly corporate employees began aggressively unloading heavy boxes of expensive supplies from the massive trunk, Alexander impatiently checked his $30,000 solid gold Rolex. 5 minutes. Quickly sign the boring tax papers, awkwardly smile for one pathetic photo, and he would be aggressively speeding right back to his luxury office for a highly critical, multi-million-dollar video conference with elite European investors. Simple, fast, highly efficient. The cramped interior of the humble shelter smelled aggressively of cheap industrial disinfectant and stale, burnt coffee. An elderly, exhausted volunteer slowly guided him down a narrow, dimly lit hallway, proudly explaining the vital services they desperately offered to highly vulnerable, struggling single mothers. Alexander nodded completely mechanically, his brilliant mind infinitely more focused on the incessant, aggressive buzzing of urgent emails flooding his smartphone than on the depressing conversation. Right through here, Mr. Vance. The director is eagerly waiting for you in the main common room. Alexander finally looked up from his glowing screen as he stepped into the large, brightly lit room. And in that exact, terrifying microsecond, time completely, violently froze. Standing right in the middle of a small group of exhausted women, gently cradling their newborn babies. One highly specific, deeply familiar figure violently grabbed his absolute attention. Her long chestnut hair was casually pulled back into a highly messy, practical ponytail, but she possessed the exact same breathtaking honey-colored eyes that had completely, utterly captivated him exactly 1 year ago. Camilla, she saw him, and all the blood violently drained from her beautiful face. She turned pure ghost white. She instinctively, fiercely clutched the tiny baby she was holding incredibly tight against her chest. A fragile newborn, from what Alexander's shocked brain could rapidly deduce. The blood violently froze completely solid inside Alexander's veins when he aggressively noticed the tiny, specific features of the baby's face. The baby possessed the exact same highly distinctive dark birthmark directly under his right eye that Alexander shared exactly with his own powerful father and his late grandfather. Mr. Vance? The director's voice sounded incredibly distant, exactly as if it were echoing from underwater. Is absolutely everything all right? Alexander completely ignored the question. His wide, terrified eyes remained violently glued to Camilla, who was now desperately, frantically, attempting to quietly slip away toward a dark side door. "Camila, wait." She completely froze. Her slender shoulders became violently tense, but she absolutely refused to turn around. The tiny baby let out a soft, sweet whimper. The heavy word violently escaped Alexander's lips, exactly like a low, dangerous guttural growl, heavily loaded with a massive, explosive mixture of blinding shock and deep anger. "Exactly when were you planning on telling me?" The other terrified women in the room instantly sensed the highly toxic, thick tension and rapidly, discreetly began to scatter. The director, profoundly comprehending the highly charged, explosive situation, quickly followed them out, leaving Alexander and Camila completely, utterly alone. Camila finally, slowly turned around. Her beautiful eyes were brilliantly shining with highly contained, desperate tears. "Alexander, is he mine?" The heavy question was completely, utterly unnecessary. The biological resemblance was absolutely, terrifyingly undeniable. But he desperately, violently needed to hear it directly from her trembling lips. "His name is Matteo," she whispered, her voice barely an audible breath. "He is exactly 3 weeks old." Alexander aggressively took a massive step toward them, but Camila instinctively, terrifiedly, flinched backward. That specific, fearful gesture violently struck him exactly like a physical punch to the gut. "Why?" The single, heavy word contained agonizing years of deep reproach, massive confusion, and pure, raw pain. "We had a beautiful life planned together, Camila. Why the hell did you just violently disappear exactly like that? Why on earth did you maliciously hide this from me?" A single, lonely tear slowly rolled down Camila's pale cheek. "Absolutely everything is not exactly as it seems, Alexander. There are massive, terrifying things you absolutely don't know. Things that..." Little Matteo's sudden, loud cry violently interrupted her heavy words. A tiny, desperate sound. Camila immediately began gently, lovingly rocking him. But her terrified eyes absolutely never left Alexander's. "Do absolutely not dare to run away again." Alexander's deep voice slightly softened, but it flawlessly maintained its terrifying, absolute intensity. "This time, I will absolutely not let you violently disappear, not without massive, completely honest explanations." The heavy air between them violently vibrated with massive, unanswered questions and highly toxic, hidden truths. Matteo gradually, peacefully calmed down in his mother's safe arms, completely oblivious to the massive, explosive drama aggressively unfolding around him. "Okay," Camila finally yielded, her exhausted shoulders dropping in a heavy gesture of absolute defeat. "But absolutely not here, not exactly like this." Alexander slowly nodded. He aggressively pulled out his expensive smartphone and ruthlessly canceled absolutely every single multi-million-dollar meeting he had scheduled for the entire day. Absolutely nothing else mattered right now. Both of their separate worlds had just violently, irrevocably collided and changed forever. And the massive answers he desperately sought absolutely could not wait a single minute longer. Interactive question. Alexander just found out he has a son. Do you think Camila was right to keep Matteo a secret? Share your thoughts below. Part 2. Unearthing the Toxic Past. The small, cheap coffee shop. Right around the corner from the run-down shelter was almost completely empty at that late afternoon hour. Alexander intentionally chose a highly secluded, dark booth, completely far away from the large windows and any highly curious, prying eyes. Camila sat heavily across from him. Little Matteo was sleeping incredibly peacefully in his cheap plastic car seat. "A black espresso, please," Alexander ordered the bored waitress. "Just tap water is fine, thank you," Camila requested. Her voice sounded incredibly tired, highly resigned. The heavy, suffocating silence between them weighed exactly like a ton of bricks. Alexander literally could not stop intensely staring at Matteo, meticulously studying every single tiny detail of his peaceful, sleeping face. It was completely, utterly surreal to think that just exactly 1 hour ago, his absolute biggest global concern had been a boring video conference with arrogant European investors. "Why the hell are you at a homeless shelter?" he demanded first, actively avoiding the significantly more explosive, difficult questions for the brief moment. Camila nervously, frantically toyed with her cheap paper napkin. "I am a dedicated volunteer there. I actively help the other struggling mothers. I teach them vital basics about newborn baby care, how to navigate complex legal paperwork." She abruptly stopped, exactly as if she had accidentally revealed way too much. "And you live in a tiny, run-down apartment just a few blocks away. It isn't a massive mansion, but it is absolutely enough for us." Alexander aggressively clenched his fists completely out of sight under the table. The horrifying idea that his own biological son had been born into such pathetic, struggling circumstances, when he could have effortlessly, instantly provided them with absolute, untouchable luxury, was deeply, physically agonizing. "I desperately tried to formally contact you." Camila's heavy words violently interrupted his dark thoughts. "The absolute second I discovered I was pregnant." "Oh, really?" The toxic irony in his deep voice was completely palpable. "And exactly what happened? Because as far as I vividly remember, you simply violently disappeared one random Tuesday. Absolutely no explanation, no letter, nothing." Matteo shifted slightly in his deep sleep, and both adults violently held their breath until the tiny baby settled back down. "It absolutely wasn't that simple." Camila finally looked up, and for the absolute first time, Alexander clearly saw something infinitely sharper than just pure fear in her beautiful eyes. He clearly saw deep, agonizing pain and massive, unadulterated anger. Elena aggressively took care of it. Elena. The highly toxic name violently dropped exactly like a massive nuclear bomb directly between them. Elena. His highly arrogant, elite ex-fiancée. The incredibly wealthy woman he had desperately, pathetically attempted to forcefully rebuild his shattered life with right after Camila had violently abandoned him. Or, at least, that was the highly fabricated version of the story he had blindly believed until this exact microsecond. What the hell does Elena have to do with absolutely any of this? She aggressively intercepted me in the lobby on the exact day I was coming up to your massive office to happily tell you about the pregnancy. Camila swallowed incredibly hard, exactly as if the toxic words physically burned her throat. She aggressively shoved highly intimate photos of the two of you directly in my face. She explicitly, arrogantly told me that you two were already officially engaged, that you had already actively begun planning the massive luxury wedding. That was agonizing months after you left. Alexander leaned heavily forward, his mind violently spinning in absolute confusion. Not according to the exact dates explicitly printed on those photos. Camila aggressively pulled out her cheap smartphone, rapidly found something, and violently shoved the screen directly toward Alexander. Look very closely at the exact date on the financial newspaper that Elena is arrogantly holding in this engagement photo. Alexander aggressively took the phone and physically felt the solid floor violently open up completely beneath his feet. The exact date clearly printed on the newspaper was exactly 3 entire months before Camila had ever disappeared. This is completely medically impossible. I absolutely never. She also possessed highly explicit text messages, intimate emails, Camila continued, her voice violently trembling. She explicitly, terrifyingly threatened me. She said that if I ever ever dared to magically appear in your perfect life with a bastard baby, she would personally, violently ensure that my entire medical career and my pristine reputation were completely, permanently destroyed. She arrogantly reminded me that she possessed the massive, untouchable wealth and the elite political contacts to effortlessly do it. Alexander aggressively ran his shaking hand down his face, desperately trying to mentally process this massive, devastating, completely new information. How on earth had he absolutely never noticed? How could he have been so incredibly, blindingly stupid? There is significantly more, Camila added incredibly softly, looking lovingly down at sleeping Matteo. But I honestly think that is absolutely enough massive trauma for one day. Alexander nodded slowly, profoundly understanding that this horrific revelation was just the absolute tip of a massive, highly toxic iceberg. As he intensely watched his beautiful son peacefully sleep, a fierce, terrifying, unbreakable determination violently formed deep inside his soul. He was going to aggressively uncover the absolute, complete truth. No matter the massive, violent cost. Interactive question. What do you think about Elena's toxic betrayal? Is she truly capable of such massive manipulation? Share your thoughts below. Part 3. A father's fierce decision. The late afternoon sun was heavily setting over the massive city when Alexander aggressively parked his luxury SUV directly in front of the highly modest, run-down apartment building where Camila currently lived. Matteo had happily woken up during the short drive, and his tiny, dark eyes were curiously, actively observing absolutely everything around him. "You absolutely do not have to come upstairs," Camila murmured nervously, carefully unbuckling the cheap car seat. "Please." Alexander's deep voice sounded incredibly different, infinitely softer, yet significantly more desperate than she ever remembered. "I desperately, truly need to officially meet him." Camila hesitated for a highly agonizing moment before slowly nodding. The cheap elevator was completely broken, so they slowly climbed the dark, highly unkempt stairs all the way up to the 3rd floor. The tiny apartment was incredibly small, but flawlessly clean, with a few cheap, colorful baby toys scattered across the small living room rug. "Please sit down," Camila offered, gesturing toward a highly worn, faded sofa while gently cradling Matteo. Do you want to carefully hold him?" Alexander physically felt his heart violently hammering against his ribs. With incredibly trembling hands, he slowly, highly reverently, took the tiny boy that Camila gently offered him. Matteo stared intensely at him, and for one beautiful, massive moment, father and son deeply studied each other. "He possesses your exact eyes," Camila whispered softly, sitting down right next to him. "And the exact same birthmark." Alexander gently, lovingly touched the tiny, unique mark directly under Matteo's right eye. "Exactly like my father, and my grandfather. That is exactly why I absolutely couldn't deny it the absolute microsecond I saw him." Camila smiled incredibly weakly. "He is exactly like you." The heavy silence that violently followed was completely loaded with massive, highly contained emotions. Matteo happily played with Alexander's expensive silk tie, completely oblivious to the massive, highly toxic tension aggressively surrounding him. "Why exactly didn't you fiercely fight?" Alexander finally asked, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you aggressively insist on explicitly telling me the absolute truth?" Camila violently stood up, aggressively walking toward the small window. Elena possessed highly falsified, fabricated evidence of massive medical irregularities at the clinic where I worked. Completely forged legal documents, heavily altered medical prescriptions. Absolutely all of it was completely fabricated, of course. but it was incredibly, terrifyingly convincing enough to permanently, violently destroy my entire medical career and send me to federal prison. We could have aggressively fought that toxic garbage together. How? Camilla violently spun around, her beautiful eyes brilliantly shining with highly contained, angry tears. You fiercely loved her. Or at least that is exactly what I believed. Every single elite magazine, every massive newspaper explicitly showed exactly how incredibly, blissfully happy you both supposedly were. The highly successful, arrogant billionaire and the absolute perfect elite heiress. Alexander slowly looked down at little Matteo, who was happily beginning to doze off again securely in his strong arms. I absolutely never, ever loved her. It was a massive, highly desperate, pathetic attempt to somehow move forward after I thought I violently lost you. And now? What exactly do you desperately want now, Alexander? The massive, heavy question hung violently between them, exactly like a terrifying storm cloud. I desperately want to be an absolute, permanent part of his life, he responded completely, without a single microsecond of hesitation. Of both of your lives, if you will graciously allow me. It absolutely isn't that simple. I profoundly know that, Alexander stated, carefully standing up, holding Matteo incredibly close to his chest. But for the absolute first time in agonizing years, I know exactly, perfectly what I truly want. And I will aggressively do absolutely whatever it takes to permanently secure it. Interactive question. What do you think of Camilla's reasons for not fighting for Alexander? Is her massive fear understandable? Tell us your thoughts below. Part 4. Uncovering Elena's toxic plot. The massive, highly luxurious executive office remained completely, terrifyingly silent, as Alexander meticulously, aggressively reviewed the highly confidential files on his glowing computer screen. It was exactly 3 a.m., but sleep was the absolute last thing on his brilliant, racing mind. Displayed brightly on the massive screen, dozens of highly deleted, recovered old emails violently revealed an absolute, devastating truth. Mr. Vance, his highly trusted, elite personal assistant Marcus, quietly entered holding a thick, heavy folder. I successfully found exactly what you urgently requested. The massive, highly secure security logs from the entire previous year. Alexander aggressively snatched the heavy folder with violently trembling hands. The highly encrypted security camera footage absolutely, undeniably, confirmed Camilla's horrific story. She had desperately attempted to visit him exactly 3 separate times that specific month. And every single, agonizing time, Elena had aggressively intercepted her in the massive lobby, highly effectively, maliciously blocking her physical access to the elevators. Is there absolutely anything else I urgently need to know, Marcus? The elite assistant violently hesitated for a highly uncomfortable moment. Elena, she highly frequently ordered me to aggressively filter absolutely all of your incoming calls and private messages. She arrogantly claimed that you were under massive corporate stress and desperately needed to completely focus on the global merger. And you absolutely never, ever thought to mention that massive detail to me, Alexander violently snapped. She was your official elite fiancée, sir. I blindly assumed that she... Marcus abruptly stopped, looking incredibly uncomfortable. I am deeply, profoundly sorry, sir. I should have aggressively questioned it. Alexander leaned heavily back in his expensive leather chair, completely, utterly exhausted. The massive, highly toxic pieces of the horrifying puzzle were finally, flawlessly snapping together. The mysteriously missed calls, the urgent text messages that miraculously never arrived, the highly orchestrated toxic coincidences that had violently kept Camilla entirely away from him. His phone suddenly, violently vibrated. A text message from Camilla. Matteo has a highly aggressive fever. It isn't catastrophic, but he is incredibly restless and crying. Completely without a single second of hesitation, Alexander aggressively grabbed his suit jacket. Violently cancel absolutely all of my massive corporate meetings for tomorrow, Marcus. Camilla's tiny apartment was completely dark when he frantically arrived. She slowly opened the door with a violently crying Matteo securely in her arms, the tiny baby softly, agonizingly whimpering. You absolutely didn't have to come. I am his biological father. The heavy words still felt incredibly new on his lips, but they felt absolutely, perfectly right. What exactly did the pediatrician say? It is just a severe cold. I successfully gave him the infant medicine, but he absolutely refuses to sleep. Camilla stepped back, graciously allowing Alexander to enter. He aggressively extended his strong arms, and Camilla, after a tiny microsecond of hesitation, gently passed the burning baby to him. Matteo instantly curled up tightly against his broad chest, his tiny, fragile body radiating highly unnatural heat from the fever. I successfully found the massive proof. Alexander gently, highly rhythmically rocked Matteo as he spoke. I found absolutely everything Elena maliciously did. The highly deleted emails, the heavily manipulated security footage, the toxic threats. Camilla sat down heavily on the cheap sofa, looking completely, utterly exhausted. It absolutely doesn't even matter anymore. It absolutely does matter. Alexander's voice was forged of pure steel, because it explicitly proves that you absolutely never, ever stopped fiercely fighting for us, and I was simply way too blindingly stupid and arrogant to clearly see it. Matteo finally, miraculously began to peacefully doze off. His rapid, shallow breathing slowly became beautifully regular and deep. Alexander gently, flawlessly laid him down in his cheap crib, intensely watching his tiny chest beautifully rise and fall. Exactly what are we going to aggressively do now? Camilla whispered softly from the bedroom doorway. Alexander slowly turned toward her, an absolute, terrifying determination violently shining in his dark eyes. We are going to aggressively take back absolutely all the massive time we violently lost, if you will graciously allow me. Interactive question. What do you think Alexander will aggressively do to confront Elena? And what does recovering lost time actually mean for him and Camilla? Share your predictions below. Part 5. Breaking free. Alexander's elite, highly terrifying corporate lawyer, Elias Valencia, was an incredibly sharp, formidable legal shark, possessing a massive, opulent corner office completely overlooking the bustling financial district of the city. His powerful father had flawlessly managed the massive, complex legal affairs of the billionaire Vance family for decades. Elias listened incredibly intently, while Alexander aggressively explained the highly devastating, toxic situation. Do you fully, profoundly comprehend the massive, federal gravity of these explosive accusations? Elias asked, aggressively adjusting his designer glasses while meticulously reviewing the heavy stack of documents scattered across his mahogany desk. Elena comes directly from an incredibly powerful, massive political family with elite, highly dangerous connections. I literally do not give a damn who the hell her family is. Alexander violently stood up, completely incapable of containing his pure, unadulterated, raw energy. She maliciously, completely destroyed my entire life. She aggressively manipulated absolutely everyone around her, and she violently kept me completely separated from my own biological son. And from Camilla, Elias added incredibly softly. Alexander stopped completely by the massive window, aggressively glaring down at the sprawling city far below him. I urgently need you to aggressively prepare absolutely everything. Official federal paternity tests, massive legal recognition documents, absolutely whatever is legally necessary to build an impenetrable, untransferable, ironclad fortress around Matteo. And exactly what about Elena? Alexander slowly spun around, his dark eyes violently burning with an incredibly cold, lethal determination. I desperately want her to violently pay for exactly what she maliciously did. But first, I desperately need to flawlessly fix things with Camila. The sudden ringing of his phone violently interrupted the tense conversation. It was a beautiful message from Camila, featuring a highly adorable photo of little Matteo laughing brightly during his morning bath. Something massive and completely frozen violently melted deep inside Alexander's chest when he saw that incredibly pure, innocent smile. "I will aggressively help you," Elias stated, rapidly organizing the heavy legal papers. "But you absolutely must be highly, incredibly cautious. Elena will absolutely not sit idly by while you violently destroy her fake, perfect life." Alexander confidently walked out of the massive law firm with a highly explosive mixture of violently conflicting emotions. Crushing guilt for stupidly failing to see the massive red flags earlier, blinding white-hot rage directly aimed at Elena, and an incredibly deep, profound yearning to aggressively recover exactly what he had violently lost. In the highly secure Fabio VIP parking garage, a highly familiar, toxic figure was arrogantly waiting right next to his massive SUV. Elena smirked, looking exactly as elegant, highly polished, and maliciously calculating as ever. "Alexander, darling, did you honestly, arrogantly think I wouldn't aggressively find out? We have absolutely nothing to discuss." "Oh, we absolutely do." Elena aggressively took a highly confident step toward him. "Do you honestly believe that pathetic, poor little Camilla will forgive you so incredibly easily? That she will magically forget exactly how you ruthlessly abandoned her?" "I absolutely did not abandon her." Alexander violently confronted her, his deep voice heavily trembling with pure, barely contained fury. "You maliciously, actively ensured that. You aggressively made absolutely sure to violently push her away. I simply did exactly what was highly necessary for our elite brand." Elena flawlessly maintained her toxic smile, but her eyes were completely dead, entirely devoid of any human warmth. "We were an absolute perfect power couple, Alexander. We can still effortlessly dominate this city. You are completely, utterly sick." Alexander aggressively pulled out his smartphone. "I possess the absolute, undeniable proof of exactly what you maliciously did. Absolutely. Every single toxic lie. This time, you will absolutely not be able to aggressively manipulate the narrative." Elena's arrogant, toxic smile finally violently faltered, instantly replaced by a microscopic, highly telling flash of pure fear. "You had better be incredibly careful, Alexander. Massive, dirty corporate wars absolutely always leave highly innocent, tragic victims completely destroyed. Is that a massive federal threat? It is a highly friendly warning." Elena violently turned to walk away, but abruptly stopped. "Do send my absolute best regards to poor little Matteo." Alexander physically felt all the blood violently freeze in his veins. Hearing Elena's highly toxic mouth maliciously utter the exact name of his innocent son filled him with a blinding, absolute terror he had absolutely never, ever experienced before. He desperately needed to fiercely protect his brand new family, no matter the massive, violent cost. Interactive question. What do you think of Elena's highly toxic final warning? Is it a credible, dangerous threat? Or does Alexander finally possess absolute control? Tell us below. Part 6. A brand new beginning. Alexander arrived quietly at Camila's modest apartment, holding a tiny, highly expensive gift bag carefully in his hands. The beautiful, soft sound of a gentle lullaby peacefully filtered through the thin door while he patiently waited for her to open it. "You arrived incredibly early," Camila murmured softly as she opened the door, with a deeply sleeping Matteo securely resting on her shoulder. "I brought him a tiny surprise." Alexander gently extended the bag, highly noticing the deep, dark, exhausted circles under Camila's beautiful eyes. "Rough night?" "Incredibly difficult. He has been aggressively battling severe colic." Camila stepped aside to let him in, walking softly directly toward the tiny nursery. "He barely slept a single wink." Alexander followed her completely silently, intensely watching her gently, flawlessly lay Matteo down in his cheap crib. The simple plastic mobile directly above the crib slowly rotated, casting soft, comforting animal shadows completely across the walls. "It is a highly vintage silver rattle," Alexander quietly explained, smoothly pulling the expensive gift out of the bag. "My late father generously gave me the exact same one when I was a tiny baby." Camila slowly took the beautiful toy. Her soft fingers accidentally, briefly brushed directly against Alexander's. The tiny physical contact, although incredibly brief, violently sent a massive, crackling electrical current completely between them. "Thank you." She carefully placed it right next to the crib. "Do you want some fresh coffee?" In the incredibly tiny kitchen, Alexander quietly watched Camila efficiently prepare 2 hot cups. Her physical movements were highly mechanical, exactly as if she were desperately, actively trying to flawlessly maintain a massive, emotional distance that was rapidly, inevitably crumbling. "I aggressively spoke with my elite lawyer," Alexander casually commented, gently blowing on his scalding coffee. "Specifically about legally, fully recognizing Matteo." Camila's entire body visibly, violently tensed. "There is absolutely zero need to aggressively rush this. It absolutely isn't rushing, Camila. It is absolute, fundamental responsibility." Alexander slowly set his cup down. "He also explicitly warned me about Elena. I physically saw her. She aggressively cornered me in the VIP parking garage." Alexander clearly noticed Camila turned slightly pale. "Do absolutely not worry. I have absolutely everything completely under control." "That is exactly what you arrogantly thought before," she murmured, her soft voice heavily tinged with deep, agonizing bitterness. But Matteo's sudden, loud cry violently interrupted the tense conversation. Alexander was the absolute first one to rapidly stand up. "I've got him." In the dim room, Matteo warmly received him with massive, tear-filled eyes. Alexander scooped him up incredibly carefully, frantically trying to perfectly remember all the highly complex instructions he had obsessively read online about exactly how to flawlessly hold a newborn. "Hey there, little champion," he whispered softly, gently, rhythmically rocking him. "You absolutely cannot sleep?" "Cannot." To his absolute profound surprise, Matteo almost instantly began to peacefully calm down. His incredibly tiny hands aggressively gripped Alexander's expensive dress shirt. His heavy eyes slowly began to flutter closed again. "You possess a highly natural gift," Camila stated softly from the doorway, her highly defensive expression completely softened by the incredibly beautiful scene directly in front of her. "It is pure, primal instinct." Alexander flawlessly continued gently rocking Matteo. "It feels exactly as if a massive part of my soul has been desperately waiting for this exact beautiful moment my entire life." Camila slowly stepped closer, gently adjusting the soft blanket perfectly around the baby. For one massive, highly charged moment, the three of them were standing so incredibly, intimately close that Alexander could physically feel the warm heat of her body and clearly smell the beautiful, soft scent of her hair. I fiercely promise you that this time it will be completely, absolutely different, Alexander whispered, his deep voice completely hoarse with pure, unadulterated emotion. She slowly looked up, her beautiful eyes finally, flawlessly meeting his. And for the absolute first time since their explosive reunion, Alexander clearly saw a massive, undeniable spark of pure hope brilliantly shining in them. Part 7. Dismantling the Enemy. Elena's massive, luxurious executive corner office on the absolute top floor of the Vance Tower was being aggressively, rapidly emptied when Alexander confidently strode in. Nervous corporate employees were frantically carrying out heavy cardboard boxes under the highly strict, watchful eyes of armed corporate security, while Elena sat completely frozen behind her massive mahogany desk, looking exactly as highly elegant and dangerously toxic as ever, completely despite the highly humiliating circumstances. "Did you arrogantly come here just to maliciously gloat?" she asked coldly, absolutely not bothering to lift her eyes from the massive legal termination documents she was furiously signing. "I explicitly came here to ensure you absolutely, completely understand the massive message," Alexander stated, aggressively slamming the heavy office door completely shut behind him. "Stay the hell away from my family." Elena finally, slowly looked up at him, a highly toxic, freezing smile violently playing on her perfectly painted lips. "Your family? The exact same pathetic family you happily abandoned for me? The exact same family you eagerly allowed me to make you believe had completely vanished?" Alexander violently slammed a massive, thick legal folder directly onto the mahogany desk. It contained absolutely all the undeniable proof of her massive, toxic manipulations. Every single altered email, every highly forged photograph, every terrifying, chilling threat. "And exactly what the hell did you ultimately gain?" Elena violently stood up, aggressively walking around the massive desk. "Has poor, pathetic Camilla officially forgiven you? Does she actually blindly trust you again?" "I am absolutely not here to discuss that with you. I am here to aggressively warn you." "Warn me?" Elena let out a sharp, highly toxic laugh that completely lacked any genuine humor. "Darling, you absolutely haven't even begun to see exactly what I am truly capable of. If you ever dare to approach Camilla or Matteo," Alexander's deep voice violently dropped to an incredibly dangerous, lethal tone, "I will personally, aggressively ensure that every single elite corporation in this entire country clearly knows your true, toxic nature. Your highly ruthless, illegal methods. And you honestly, arrogantly believe that will stop me?" Elena stepped aggressively closer, her highly intense, toxic perfume violently filling the narrow space completely between them. "You were absolutely always so incredibly pathetically naive, Alexander. So incredibly easy to flawlessly manipulate. Not anymore." Alexander took a highly confident step backward. "This time, I am exactly one massive step ahead of you." Exactly as if it were a highly choreographed signal, the heavy office door violently swung open, and Elena's highly powerful billionaire father aggressively stormed in, heavily followed by Elias, Alexander's elite lawyer. "That is absolutely enough, Elena!" Her powerful father's massive voice resonated with absolute, terrifying authority. "The massive legal settlement is officially signed. If you ever dare to illegally attempt absolutely anything against the Vance family, the massive financial and social consequences will be absolutely instantaneous and catastrophic." Elena visibly, violently paled. "Dad, Not a single damn word more!" Elena's father violently spun toward Alexander. "You possess my absolute ironclad word, My highly toxic daughter will absolutely never, ever illegally interfere in your life again." Alexander gave a sharp, highly satisfied nod, aggressively grabbing the heavy folder off the desk. Before confidently walking out, he completely stopped in the doorway. "By the way, Elena," he turned back one absolute final time, "Matteo possesses my exact eyes, and Camilla's incredibly beautiful smile. He is absolutely, flawlessly perfect." In the private executive elevator, Elias smoothly handed him the massive, final legal documents. "It is completely, legally finished. Elena is being permanently, forcibly transferred to the highly isolated European branch. The massive corporate agreement officially includes a highly strict, permanent federal restraining order." Alexander took a massive, incredibly deep breath for the absolute first time in agonizing weeks. His smartphone vibrated. A beautiful message from Camilla, featuring an incredibly cute photo of little Matteo sound asleep, completely surrounded by his colorful toys. "Was the massive, aggressive war truly worth it?" Elias asked, highly noticing the massive, genuine smile on his client's face. "Every single, agonizing microsecond." Alexander smiled warmly, safely pocketing his phone. Now, the absolute hardest, most vital part remained. Aggressively, meticulously rebuilding absolute trust with Camilla. Step by tiny step, day by agonizing day, until the massive, heavy walls between them finally, beautifully crumbled to dust. Part 8. Building a new home. The beautiful local playground was almost completely empty that quiet, sunny Sunday afternoon. Camilla sat peacefully on a wooden bench, highly contentedly watching as Alexander gently, lovingly pushed Matteo's expensive stroller back and forth, quietly telling him highly elaborate stories that the tiny baby listened to with absolute rapt attention, exactly as if he perfectly understood every single complex word. "Your brilliant grandfather aggressively built this massive corporate empire completely from scratch," Alexander explained with his incredibly soft, highly patient voice. "One beautiful day, it will absolutely all be yours, if you fiercely want it." Camilla literally could not help but smile radiantly. Just exactly one agonizing month ago, the highly terrifying idea of Alexander being this incredibly close to Matteo absolutely paralyzed her with fear. Now, seeing them beautifully together felt incredibly, profoundly natural. Exactly as if it had absolutely always been exactly like this. "What exactly are you deeply thinking about?" Alexander smoothly sat down right beside her, while Matteo dozed peacefully in his expensive stroller. "About exactly how incredibly, massively things have changed. About Elena. About the massive company. About us." Us. Alexander stared directly, intensely at her, but entirely without applying any toxic pressure. "Do you know exactly what I mean?" Camilla slowly looked away, staring out across the peaceful park. "The exact, fierce way you aggressively defended Matteo, exactly how you violently stood up to Elena. It was absolutely the right thing to do." Alexander leaned heavily forward, resting his elbows comfortably on his knees. "I should have aggressively done it significantly earlier, if I had only successfully seen the massive red flags." A small, energetic group of children ran wildly past them, their loud, pure laughter beautifully filling the crisp air. Camilla vividly, beautifully imagined Matteo in a few short years, happily playing in this exact same park, with Alexander patiently teaching him exactly how to ride a bicycle. "The director at the shelter profoundly told me that massive fear can easily mutate into a highly toxic prison," Camilla murmured softly, vividly remembering the wise woman's words. "What exactly do you think?" "I think," Camilla took a massive, deep breath, that perhaps it is officially time to aggressively open some locked doors. Alexander violently spun toward her, his beautiful eyes brilliantly shining with highly contained, massive hope. In that exact, perfect moment, Matteo aggressively began to move in his stroller, his tiny, chubby fists waving enthusiastically in the air. "Is he hungry?" they both asked in absolute, perfect unison, and then laughed loudly at the beautiful coincidence. Do you want to come over to the apartment?" Camilla tentatively proposed, genuinely surprising herself. "We could easily cook dinner together?" Alexander's massive, radiant smile completely illuminated his handsome face. "I would absolutely, fiercely love that." As they happily walked back toward the modest apartment, their footsteps synchronized in an incredibly natural, highly comforting way. Camilla physically felt something massive and beautiful violently shift deep inside her soul. The heavy, thick cracks in the massive iron wall she had aggressively built entirely around her shattered heart were rapidly expanding, beautifully allowing massive rays of warm light to pour in. Light she genuinely thought had been permanently, violently lost forever. "Camilla." Alexander completely stopped right in front of the modest building. "Thank you." "For exactly what?" "For graciously granting me the massive, incredible opportunity to be a real part of this." He gently pointed at Matteo, then at her, encompassing the beautiful moment they were actively sharing. "To be a part of our family." The heavy, beautiful word family resonated powerfully in the crisp air between them, completely loaded with massive promises and infinite, beautiful possibilities. Camilla physically felt her heart aggressively accelerate. But for the absolute first time in agonizing years, it absolutely wasn't because of blinding fear. "Let's go," she stated simply, holding the front door wide open for him. The massive dinner absolutely isn't going to magically cook itself. And as they slowly climbed the stairs, with Alexander incredibly carefully carrying Matteo's heavy stroller, Camilla fiercely permitted herself to vividly, beautifully imagine a completely different, massive future. One where heavy, defensive walls were absolutely unnecessary. One where pure, unadulterated love was infinitely stronger than blinding fear. Part 9. The True Home of Love. The phone violently, aggressively rang at exactly 3 a.m. Alexander violently woke up with a massive start, instantly recognizing the highly specific, customized ringtone he had explicitly assigned exclusively to Camilla's calls. Matteo has a highly aggressive, massive fever. Camilla's terrified voice was violently trembling. "It absolutely isn't going down with the infant medicine, and he is breathing incredibly strangely. I am aggressively on my way right now." Alexander was already frantically throwing on his clothes while actively speaking. "Call emergency services immediately. I will meet you directly at the luxury hospital." The frantic drive to Camilla's apartment was an absolute, blinding blur of red traffic lights and completely empty city streets. When he violently screeched to a halt, she was already frantically waiting for him right at the entrance, with Matteo securely wrapped in her arms. The tiny baby's face was violently, brightly flushed from the terrifying fever. "The massive ambulance is actively on its way," Camilla murmured, her beautiful eyes brilliantly shining with highly contained, terrified tears. Alexander aggressively took Matteo into his strong arms, physically feeling the terrifying, unnatural heat aggressively radiating from the tiny body. "Hey there, little champion. Daddy is right here." The blinding, flashing lights of the massive ambulance violently illuminated the dark street mere seconds later. The highly tense ride to the emergency room was absolute agony, with the highly trained paramedics constantly, aggressively monitoring Matteo's vital signs. Camilla fiercely clung to Alexander's hand, exactly as if he were her absolute only, desperate anchor to actual reality. Severe bronchiolitis, the elite pediatrician on call calmly explained, after meticulously, aggressively examining little Matteo. It is highly common in fragile infants his exact age, but he will absolutely need to stay strictly under intensive observation overnight. The private luxury hospital room was incredibly small, but highly secure, featuring a specialized medical crib where Matteo was currently resting peacefully, fully connected to high-tech medical monitors. Camila adamantly, fiercely refused to leave his side for even a single microsecond, while Alexander aggressively handled all the massive, complex bureaucratic paperwork. "You urgently need to get some sleep," Alexander gently suggested, but Camila violently shook her head. "I literally cannot. Every single time I close my eyes, I am absolutely terrified." She accepted the hot coffee, but her eyes absolutely never left Matteo. "He is in incredibly capable, highly elite hands," Alexander stated, sitting incredibly closely right beside her. Their shoulders gently, comfortingly touched. "And we are absolutely right here together." The agonizing hours passed incredibly slowly. Matteo's massive fever gradually, successfully began to drop, and his labored breathing became significantly less forced. Near the absolute break of dawn, Camila finally, heavily succumbed to sheer, crushing exhaustion. Her beautiful head rested highly comfortably on Alexander's broad shoulder. He intensely, lovingly watched her peacefully sleep, carefully noting the deep lines of pure worry etched on her beautiful face. The exact way her hand was still fiercely extended directly toward Matteo's crib, highly protective, even in her deep dreams. He incredibly carefully removed her shoes and gently covered her with his expensive suit jacket. "Thank you," she whispered incredibly softly, without even opening her beautiful eyes, snuggling significantly closer to his warmth. "For exactly what? For fiercely being here, for absolutely never, ever giving up on us." The bright morning sun was just aggressively beginning to peek through the massive window when Matteo finally woke up. His beautiful eyes were significantly brighter and highly alert. The elite pediatrician, highly satisfied with his massive progress, officially authorized his discharge for that exact afternoon. "I am aggressively taking both of you home," Alexander stated firmly, while they rapidly packed their belongings. Camila nodded slowly, and for the absolute first time in agonizing months, there was absolutely zero toxic doubt in her beautiful gaze. Only pure, unadulterated trust, and something massive, something incredibly beautiful that neither of them had actively dared to formally name yet. Part 10. Building Our Fortress. Alexander confidently parked his luxury SUV directly in front of the highly modest apartment building, aggressively checking the tiny, expensive velvet box securely hidden in his suit jacket pocket for the absolute third time. After agonizing weeks of meticulous, massive planning, he had finally, perfectly found the absolute right moment. The cheap elevator, miraculously actually functioning that specific day, took him smoothly up to the third floor. He could clearly, beautifully hear Matteo's loud, pure laughter echoing from the hallway. That exact sound had rapidly, magically become the absolute favorite melody of his entire life. Camila opened the door with an incredibly warm, radiant smile on her beautiful face. Matteo was happily, rapidly crawling across the living room rug, aggressively chasing a highly colorful, noisy musical toy. "I actually have a massive surprise for you too," Alexander stated, gracefully crouching down to effortlessly scoop up Matteo, who immediately, happily attempted to grab his expensive tie. "Can we please talk?" Camila nodded slowly, although Alexander distinctly noticed a tiny, highly cautious flash of deep concern in her beautiful eyes. They sat closely together on the worn sofa, with Matteo happily playing right between them. "These last few incredible months have been... I am infinitely, profoundly grateful for them, Camila," Alexander, please let me finish. He smoothly, confidently, pulled the tiny velvet box completely out of his pocket. It is absolutely not exactly what you think. Inside the highly expensive box lay exactly 2 brilliantly shining golden keys. What exactly is this? Camilla asked, slowly taking one of the heavy keys, her forehead deeply furrowed in pure, massive confusion. I aggressively purchased my parents' massive estate. Alexander smiled warmly at the absolute pure shock violently registering on Camilla's beautiful face. The exact massive house where I proudly grew up, where I took my absolute first steps. Camilla traced the sharp edges of the keys, completely, utterly fascinated by their bright shine. It is exactly 10 minutes away from your beloved shelter, Alexander continued smoothly. It possesses a massive, sprawling garden, incredibly spacious bedrooms, and he took a highly significant, dramatic pause. The absolute greatest, most incredible playroom any child could ever possibly desire. Alexander, we absolutely cannot. It is absolutely not toxic pressure. He gently, firmly interrupted her. It is an absolute option. The massive estate legally belongs entirely to Matteo. It is 100% federally registered strictly under his name. Camilla's shocked gaze violently darted from the golden keys resting in her hand directly to Matteo, who was now resting incredibly peacefully in his powerful father's lap. Why exactly your parents' massive house? Because that is exactly where I was, truly, genuinely, unconditionally happy. Alexander gently, lovingly stroked Matteo's soft hair. Because I desperately, fiercely want our beautiful son to possess the exact same incredible, magical memories that I had. And why? She took a massive, incredibly deep breath. Why exactly are you aggressively doing all of this? Because it is the absolute only place on this entire planet where I can vividly, beautifully imagine aggressively raising our incredible family. Matteo let out a tiny, adorable yawn, completely, utterly oblivious to the massive, highly crucial, life-altering moment aggressively unfolding entirely around him. And the other golden key? Camilla finally asked, her voice barely a fragile whisper. It is completely, 100% yours, if you fiercely want it. Alexander looked directly, intensely into her beautiful eyes. Absolutely zero toxic conditions. Zero arrogant pressure. Just the highly profound, unbreakable promise that no matter exactly what happened, they would absolutely always be a fierce, untouchable family for little Matteo. Camilla slowly, deliberately took the second golden key. Her soft fingers gently brushed against Alexander's. The tiny physical contact aggressively sent a highly familiar, massive electrical current violently between them, powerfully connecting absolutely everything they had previously been, everything they had tragically lost, and absolutely everything they could now beautifully, fiercely have once again. Interactive question. What a massive, beautiful gesture from Alexander. Do you think this is the perfect happy ending Camilla and Matteo truly deserve? Share your thoughts below. Part 11. A home full of promises. The massive, highly imposing Vance estate was exactly, flawlessly, how Camilla had vividly remembered it. Incredibly grand, yet deeply welcoming, featuring massive stone walls and towering floor-to-ceiling windows that beautifully allowed the warm, golden afternoon light to flood completely inside. As she walked slowly through the massive, empty rooms, with Matteo securely in her arms, beautiful, powerful memories violently flooded her, exactly like a gentle, warm tide. This is exactly where I first formally met you, Alexander stated, completely stopping in the massive threshold of the grand main living room. at the highly exclusive corporate Christmas gala. You aggressively spilled sticky punch all over my expensive designer dress. Camila smiled radiantly. The beautiful memory was as incredibly vivid as if it had violently happened just yesterday. And I graciously lent you my expensive suit jacket. Alexander took a highly confident step closer, his dark eyes brilliantly shining with deep nostalgia. You absolutely never, ever gave it back to me. I actually still possess it. The massive confession came out almost exactly like a highly intimate whisper. Matteo actively moved in Camila's arms, happily reaching his tiny hands directly toward his powerful father. This will absolutely be your massive room, little champion. Alexander smoothly pushed open a heavy oak door that perfectly led into an incredibly spacious, sunlit bedroom with breathtaking views of the sprawling gardens. My own father meticulously, lovingly painted these massive walls specifically for me when I was just a tiny boy. Camila closely observed the beautifully faded, hand-painted murals of wild animals and towering trees that completely covered the walls. They are absolutely breathtaking. We can aggressively redecorate it. Alexander slowly turned to deeply face her. We can aggressively make this massive space entirely ours. The heavy, beautiful word ours hovered massively in the warm air, completely loaded with the terrifying, beautiful idea of fiercely trusting again, of blindly, wildly loving again. But right here, safely inside this massive house, completely filled with beautiful memories and infinite promises, her massive, paralyzing fears suddenly seemed incredibly, pathetically small. Maria was absolutely 100% right, Camila murmured softly, walking slowly toward a massive window overlooking the beautiful, sprawling backyard. About exactly what? About massive fear easily mutating into a highly toxic, suffocating prison. Camila slowly turned to look directly, intensely into his eyes. I have been so incredibly, blindingly terrified of being violently hurt again that I almost completely, catastrophically lost the absolute, incredible opportunity to be genuinely happy. Alexander gently, lovingly placed Matteo directly onto the soft, plush rug, and the tiny baby immediately began happily exploring his massive, brand-new environment, completely, utterly, blissfully content. What an incredibly beautiful, satisfying ending to an explosive story. What do you guys fiercely think of Camila's profound realization about fear? And how do you think this massive new home will impact their beautiful family? Let me know your fierce thoughts in the comments below. If you absolutely loved this incredible story of redemption and true love, please smash that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another massive, life-changing story. See you in the next video, and stay fierce.